Hello, I'm Sue Seipert, co-chair of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters. The League is a nonpartisan organization formed in the early 20th century to provide information and service to voters. Last summer, for instance, the League worked really hard to register new voters or to register voters who had moved, because we want to make sure that citizens exercise their right to vote. Last fall, the League provided information about candidates and the voting process.
I'm Miles Manchester. I'm also a member of the League of Women Voters, and if you were not already aware, the League is open to membership and participation by men. I have had a particular interest in this issue of legislative redistricting since hearing a presentation by Blair Horner of the New York Public Interest Research Group over 2 years ago in Schenectady. There is a lot of public discussion about New York's government being dysfunctional. We believe this is true, and we believe the current system of determining districts in New York State is a big part of the problem. And we also believe this can be corrected. New York State can and should create a better system. Several states already have.
What we will be presenting to you today is drawn from information that is also on the League of Women Voters New York State website. While our time is limited, we hope to convince you to become more involved and as informed as you can, if you aren't already. So let's look at what the problem is and what can be done about it. Every 10 years, based on the U.S. Census, changes are made for our federal and state representation. When the elected officials make the decisions, and this will be the decisions about who, or the shape of the districts, those decisions can be made for the sake of the politicians, not the citizens. If something can be done to correct this problem, it has to be done in a limited window of time, right now. If changes in the process aren't done now, the present system stays in place for another 10 years.
Redistricting in the New York State level decides which voters are represented by which legislative seats on the federal and state levels. Local governing bodies determine their own lines. Reapportionment is a different issue. It uses the census numbers to decide how many representatives a state will have in the U.S. Congress. Right now, New York State is one of 2 states expected to lose 2 seats in the U.S. Congress this coming reapportionment process. But that's a different issue from state redistricting.
For Congress, districts have to be as equal as possible. For state legislative seats, there can be up to a 10% difference between largest and smallest districts. The Voting Rights Act also affects this because district lines cannot deny minority voters an equal opportunity to participate in the political process and to elect representatives of their choice.
The New York State Legislature has one of the highest rates of incumbent re-election in the nation as a result of gerrymandering of districts. The term gerrymandering refers to setting up districts to favor incumbents. It's a process that has been around since 1812, and we believe it has to be stopped. Remember the phrase compact and contiguous as you look at the next slides, and consider whether you see any problems here.
Sometimes there are legitimate reasons for odd shapes like this, but in New York State, they are usually the result of efforts to protect political power. In both houses, the majority party rigs district lines in an effort to maximize the re-election of incumbents.
This bizarrely shaped district was designed to help an incumbent who was later convicted of corruption and went to jail. This district
Was drawn to include part, but not all, of the North Country. It would be a very great distance to travel from one end to the other.
Some oddly configured districts can be explained by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was intended to ensure minorities the right to an effective vote. Explaining the implications of the Voting Rights Act is a little more complex than we have time for, but we encourage you to look into this in more detail on your own.
In 2002, the Democrats had the majority in the state assembly, so they could create districts that benefited them by putting larger numbers of voters into areas usually dominated by Republicans. Those voters would then have less of an impact on the district because they had so many people. On the other hand, the Republicans controlled the state Senate in 2002, so they created districts that benefited them in much the same way.
Based on the federal constitutional requirement of one person, one vote, many New York State districts are stretched to the legal limit of 10% of total deviation of population. Consider the numbers in this slide. If we round the numbers a little, there are 121,000 voters in one assembly district who have one assembly representative, compared to another district with 133,000 voters. That's a difference of 12,000 people, 12,000 citizens who are getting less representation than in the first district. In the Senate, that difference can be as much as 30,000 voters. Only 14%, or 29 out of 212 districts that were drawn in 2002 to within 1% of the ideal or average size. Downstate voters have much less adequate representation in the Senate, and upstate voters have less representation in the Assembly.
Another troubling issue is competition. The party in control of redrawing the map can eliminate challengers. There have been cases where challengers to an incumbent found themselves outside that district when the map was redrawn. There are 2 specific cases of this explained on the New York State League website.
Only 25 of 212 legislative districts in New York State, 12%, were drawn to have a similar number of major party enrollments. The enrollments in the rest favor one party or another by a wide margin. Since 1980, nearly 3,000 elections, only 39 incumbents have lost, 39 out of 3,000. How can this occur? How can this occur, this re-election of incumbents? One way is to draw district lines based on political party affiliation. With only 25 out of 212 seats having close enrollments, it's very difficult for any political challenger to take on an incumbent.
On competitive elections and incumbency protection have resulted in legislators controlled by their leaders, not their constituents, which results in legislative deadlock. Is it right for there to be a significant difference in population between districts? Is it right to maximize incumbency protection and majority preservation? Is it right to cut opponents out of districts? Is it right for politicians to draw their own district lines and deprive people of meaningful elections?
So what's the answer? Many individuals and organizations believe redistricting should be done by an independent redistricting commission. There is legislation already introduced in both the Assembly and the State Senate to create an independent commission. But that legislation might never get out of assigned committees. Other states are also working on this. Iowa has a model that deserves serious consideration.
The members of such an independent commission should be representative of both genders and the state's full racial, ethnic, and cultural diversity. These people should not hold an elective office and should not hold a party position or should not have been in either for some time. They should not have any partisan positions and certainly should not be lobbyists.
So what to do? We need to push for legislation, either the legislation that's already there. We need to galvanize public opinion. We need to encourage the new governor to veto partisan lines. We need to force reform debate during the 2011-2012 redistricting period. For more detailed information, you can find it on the websites of the League of Women Voters of New York State and the New York Public Interest Research Group, often referred to as NYPIRG. And at NYPIRG, look under Good Government. We believe there are many fine elected officials who agree that a change of this system is needed, but may not be comfortable challenging their party leadership. They need our support. Please contact your elected officials to help them do the right thing. We hope you either already are or will become engaged on this issue. We'd like to thank you for listening, thank Professor Dan DeLay and his class at Clarkson University, and everyone who has contributed to our understanding and involvement in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.